of the lowest levels on record amid a fierce trade war. Yesterday, President Trump said he's ready to make a deal with President Xi.
It did not start with an earthquake. There were no explosions, no empty shelves overnight, just a slow thinning of inventory, a few canceled shipping lanes, some missing barcodes in the warehouse. But by the time the analysts started issuing warnings, it was already too late. Because the U.S. supply chain, once hailed as the most resilient logistics network in the world, is now on the verge of total shutdown. And this time, it is not a virus. It is not a labor strike. It is trade policy, tariffs, economic retaliation, and the silent collapse of the arteries that keep America running. On May 26, 2025, the Port of Los Angeles, the country's most critical gateway for international trade, reported that incoming cargo volumes are down by over 35%. Terminal operators say 1 in every 4 scheduled vessels simply never arrived. Containers are sitting empty, truckers are being sent home, warehouse shifts are cut. This is not a slowdown, it is a freeze. And according to new forecasts, the national economic toll could exceed $50 billion, not over a year, not if things continue. $50 billion this quarter. Before we continue, hit that like button to help us beat the YouTube algorithm and to show your support. How did it come to this? The answer begins in Washington. Earlier this year, President Donald Trump reimposed sweeping tariffs on goods from China, Mexico, Canada, and Europe. Aluminum, steel, electronics, textiles, produce, everything imported was suddenly 25% more expensive. Some categories, especially goods from China, faced tariffs as high as 145%. The de minimis rule, which for decades allowed low-cost foreign goods to enter the U.S. tariff-free, was eliminated. Even sub-$800 packages, the lifeblood of e-commerce giants like Temu and Shein, are now taxed. Every pallet, every box, every container, suddenly nothing moved the same way. At first, companies tried to outrun the storm. They front-loaded shipments, they filled warehouses to the brim in the first quarter. But now those inventories are running dry, and new orders, they are not coming, because importers are not willing to pay the tariff, and exporters in China, Mexico, and elsewhere are cutting shipments or rerouting entirely. The result is a cascading breakdown. At the Port of Los Angeles, usually humming with over a dozen container ships a day, only 6 ships docked last week. More than 20 voyages were canceled this month alone, scrapping nearly 300,000 containers of incoming goods. The Port of Mobile in Alabama reported a 40% drop in Chinese origin shipments this spring. Union Pacific and BNSF railroads are now moving fewer intermodal loads, not because of a strike, but because the cargo simply never arrived. And this is where the story turns dangerous, because the system was built on momentum. Ports feed trucks, trucks feed warehouses, warehouses feed stores, and stores feed the economy. But when one part slows, the whole machine stutters. Gene Soroka, executive director of the Port of Los Angeles, put it bluntly: we have 5 to 7 weeks of full inventories left in this country. After that, choices will shrink, shelves will empty. And he is not exaggerating. The economic consequences of this supply chain crisis are profound and far-reaching. Industries across the board are feeling the pinch. Manufacturing is slowing down as raw materials become scarce. Retailers are struggling to keep products on the shelves. Small businesses, already vulnerable, are facing even greater challenges to stay afloat. Inflation is rising as the cost of goods increases, and consumers are bearing the brunt of higher prices. The ripple effects are being felt in every corner of the economy, from Wall Street to Main Street. And unless swift action is taken to address the root causes, the situation is likely to get worse before it gets better. Retailers already see it coming. Back-to-school supplies, Halloween costumes, even summer apparel. The shipments should be arriving now. But many orders were delayed, canceled, or trapped in customs amid the changing trade classifications. Before we continue, hit that subscribe button to show your support for the channel. What happens next is simple economics. When goods are scarce, prices rise. And when prices rise too fast, spending slows. And when spending slows, layoffs begin. And when layoffs begin, the headlines shift from inflation to recession. That is the scenario now being forecast by Wall Street and Washington alike. JP Morgan has raised the probability of a U.S. recession this year to 60%. The International Monetary Fund has slashed growth projections. Economists are now modeling a $50 billion GDP loss directly tied to disrupted trade, surging input costs, and the ripple effects on consumer behavior. The signals are everywhere. Auto dealerships are raising prices. On May 2nd, Ford increased the sticker price of several of its Mexico-built models by up to $2,000, explicitly blaming new tariffs. Ford now expects an additional $2.5 billion in cost burdens this year alone. General Motors has projected $4 to $5 billion in impact, and even with cost-cutting, those increases are going to hit the buyer. Meanwhile, retailers like Target and Walmart are signaling higher food prices. Brian Cornell, CEO of Target, warned this week that fruit and vegetable imports from Mexico, avocados, strawberries, bananas, will carry higher costs at checkout because a tariff on the border is not absorbed by governments. It is passed directly to you. And in case you thought it was just food and cars, think again. Electronics, toys, school supplies, holiday decor, everything from iPads to Halloween candy is now tangled in a web of tariffs, shipping delays, and sourcing chaos. And it gets worse because some factories are not just slowing down, they are shutting down. Automakers are pausing assembly lines when key parts run short. Just-in-time manufacturing, once celebrated as peak efficiency, is now a vulnerability. With parts stuck at customs or rerouted across longer, more expensive supply lines, manufacturers are idling plants until they can restock. In cities like Toledo, Chattanooga, and Tijuana, entire shifts are being sent home. And even when the goods are moving, there is nowhere to put them. Bonded warehouses, those special facilities where companies can store imports without immediately paying tariffs, are full nationwide. Over 1,700 bonded warehouses are at maximum capacity. Rental rates have quadrupled. Some logistics firms report a 6-month wait to secure new space. Customs and Border Protection is overwhelmed with requests to bond more buildings, but approvals are backlogged for months. This is the unintended consequence of a sudden tariff wall. It's not just about taxing China or pushing jobs home. It's about breaking the rhythm of global commerce. The White House's message is short-term pain for long-term gain, but companies are not so sure, and neither are the governors. Because behind closed doors, there is a revolt brewing. 12 U.S. states, led by attorneys general from New York, Oregon, and Illinois, have filed suit against the administration. Not for the tariffs themselves, but for the way they were imposed. The lawsuit argues that President Trump abused emergency powers to declare a trade war without congressional approval, that his invocation of the International Emergency Economic Powers Act was unconstitutional, that the emergency did not exist, and that the economic damage now being felt, from empty shelves to factory shutdowns, was avoidable. The case is now before a federal court, and its outcome could reshape not just this trade war, but the limits of executive authority over the entire U.S. economy. And while the lawyers argue, the clock ticks. Retailers say they have 5 to 7 weeks left before inventories run dry. Port executives say another month of missed sailings will push terminal labor into furloughs. Railroads and trucking firms are already reporting idle capacity. And the ripple effects will touch every industry, from agriculture to apparel, from autos to appliances. Some are comparing this moment to the early days of the pandemic, but there is one key difference. Back then, we had no choice. Now we do. The trade war was not triggered by a virus or a natural disaster. It was a policy choice, a political decision. And whether you agree or not, the consequences are now visible in warehouses, on loading docks, and soon in store aisles. This is not a projection, it is happening. The supply chain is thinning, the GDP is slowing, and the price tags are climbing. Stay informed, stay ready, because the next few weeks will determine whether this is just a trade war or a full-blown economic fracture.